A very important story is persecution of Christians in the Middle East. In fact, it's a story that's so prominent right now that even the United States government is very much considering whether or not Christians are subject to a genocide by Muslims within the Middle East. But the way the media covers it, unfortunately, is not always fair and balanced, as we know, from the way they cover most of the Middle East, especially with regard to Israel. So this is the story we call a story in the shadows, Christians in peril in the Islamic Middle East. And in the Christian Holy Land itself, here's a prominent example. CBS laid blame for the Holy Land Christians' troubles at Israel's feet. This occurred back actually in a very famous piece on 60 Minutes by the late Bob Simon in March of 2012. And as Andrea Levin of Camera, which is a major organization that covers media bias, she said the overarching message of the segment, that Israel is the source and cause of Christian misfortune and decline in the Holy Land, is false on many levels. CBS said the wall completely surrounds Bethlehem, turning the little town where Christ was born into what its residents call an open-air prison. That was back in April of 2012. That's a quotation. And the allegation of CBS News head and 60 Minutes producer Jeffrey Fager repeated that to a church group in April 2013 after Camera and many other organizations pointed out how completely and utterly false and unbalanced that was. But they have an agenda. The facts are, however, and this is what the story is not being told correctly or prominently for political correctness reasons, is that the Middle East Christians' troubles are not confined to Israel, Gaza, the so-called West Bank, Judea, Samaria. What is a fact is that the Christians' share of the overall Middle East population has plummeted from about 20% a century ago to approximately 5% and shrinking today. And look at this chart that we've compiled. In Lebanon, where it had been greater than 50% Christian population. Remember, the Christians have been living there for hundreds and hundreds of years, over 1,000 years, since at least the time of the Crusades. And Lebanon was a country that had about 50% Christians. At its independence in 1946, it's less than 30% today and shrinking. And why is it shrinking? Due to Islamic and Muslim persecution of the Christian population. In Iraq, 800,000 about a decade ago. Many of them Chaldeans. Less than 150,000 today, probably even less than 100,000 today. In Turkey, where there were 2 million, most people don't realize it, about 2 million Christians lived there in 1918 at the time the Ottoman Empire was dissolving. Again, less than 100,000 today. In Syria, again, a country that had almost half of its population Christians, about 4%. Jordan, about 18% down to 2%. Bethlehem. This is interesting. I'm going to talk about Bethlehem in a moment. But Bethlehem specifically, the town where Jesus was born, about 71%, now to about 15%. And I call it the territories under the Palestinian Authority. 15% down to about 2%. Now, what are those territories? Israel has ceded civilian control to the Palestinian Authority since 1993, since the Oslo Accords. Bethlehem falls within those areas. It is administered by the Palestinian Authority, who has civilian control. And since that time, the population has dwindled because of persecution of the Christian population. The only place in the entire Middle East where Christians are thriving, and in fact the population is growing, is Israel, where in 1948 there was approximately 34,000 Christians, as today there are over 150,000. Those are the facts are, which CBS doesn't want to tell you. But what we are seeing continually is that churches are being attacked by Muslims. There was a famous incident back in 2002 where Palestinian terrorists took over the famous Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, went in there to escape Israeli IDF and security forces after they committed terrorist atrocities. They holed themselves up in that church and decimated it for over 30 days until they were finally expelled. You hardly heard anything about that in the news, about what they did to that church, except the blame was placed on Israel for that. Israel did not even go in there to get these guys out. They were there and they desecrated it. This is plenty of pictures you're going to see here. That in Iraq, in Egypt, churches are being burned. That constantly goes on. Again, the media does not report too much about this. In Syria, Lebanon, Pakistan, Nigeria, Tanzania, Indonesia, we can go on and on. Fortunately, there are some responsible voices out there. One of them is Christian groups that are speaking out. There are very few of them speaking out, but one of the bigger ones is CUFI, Christians United for Israel. They are an enormous group founded by the Reverend John Hagee in San Antonio, Texas. They are actually considered, they say, the largest pro-Israel or Zionist organization in this country, with I think over 1 or 2 million members already in a very short period of time they've grown up. They are not afraid to speak out about this. And another group that was founded here in the Philadelphia region back in 1938, 10 years before the State of Israel was founded, called Friends of Israel, FOI Gospel Ministries. They are true friends of Israel. So fortunately, there are voices speaking out. And this is an issue which the media, unfortunately, is not covering and is biased against Israel.